the people who are promoting this, they really do want to see society change into their image. And that image is not very pretty. It's an image that holds up discrimination as a way to be, and it's not.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, have become essential factors for companies seeking subsidies, employees vying for promotions, or individuals aiming for positions within organizations. This concept, originally imported from the United States, has gained significant prominence in society. According to Jesse Singal in the New York Times, following George Floyd's murder, companies faced pressure to demonstrate a commitment to racial justice, leading to a surge in interest in the diversity, equity, and inclusion industry. In 2020 alone, the industry surpassed $3 billion. Is DEI counterproductive and harmful to society? Additionally, companies and businesses are now engaging in what is referred to as positive discrimination.
She determined, I understand, about 160 cases of positive discrimination had taken place.
In a recent article, David Haskell, an associate professor at Wilfrid Laurier University, highlights that opponents of DEI instruction often assert that it works and is effective in promoting positive behavior change. However, Haskell argued that this claim lacks empirical evidence to support it. Haskell was commissioned by the Aristotle Foundation for Public Policy to conduct a study and examine research related to the field of DEI. Today, he explains to us what he found as a result.
I'm David Millard Haskell. I'm an associate professor at Wilfrid Laurier University. I'm a social scientist, and I was commissioned by the Aristotle Foundation for Public Policy to conduct this study looking at the research related to the field of DEI. So they asked me to examine what the research says, and then the National Post actually picked up my research report and then covered it in, I'd say, an excellent article. It really did capture the main points. And what those main points were, surprisingly for many, is that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that kind of instruction and training, it in fact does not do what it claims to do. So what it claims to do is that it will reduce prejudice, it will reduce discrimination, and make people more willing to work together from diverse groups. There's absolutely no empirical evidence for that. Or I can't say no empirical evidence. There is empirical evidence on those studies that were very weak, those studies that didn't have validity, either internally or externally. So what they were actually measuring was not whether DEI changes behavior. What they were measuring was, can someone, when they leave a DEI instruction or training, can they actually say what they learned? Well, you better be able to, because most of these DEI programs are mandatory, and you can't move ahead in your job unless you can say what they told you in the DEI training. But that's not a measure of whether or not it changes attitudes. It's simply a measure of whether you can parrot what you were told. When we look at whether or not it can change attitudes, there's just no empirical evidence for that. Now, in addition to not being able to change attitudes, there's no evidence for that. There is clear evidence in some of the studies that it can do harm. And what they show is that it can actually increase prejudice. You go into these DEI trainings, you read this DEI material, it can actually make you more bigoted. It can activate old bigotries, or it can implant new ones in your mind. Really, I wasn't doing any new research. What I was doing was simply gathering the research that has already been conducted and putting it all in one place. Now, what we have to wonder is, if this research is already out there, why has it been ignored? Why did it take a social scientist from a university in Canada to gather all this together and present it and say, why are we ignoring this? Well, we know the reason. I mean, the reason is there's a huge financial incentive among the people who are promoting DEI. There are multi-billion-dollar industries built on DEI. So they don't want this to be debunked. We've got governments pushing this. And why? Because they can then cater to special interest groups. We also have businesses like the big banks and the big telecoms. Why would they promote something like this? Well, the reason they do is they want us to be thinking about that and not about their business practices. That is to say, it's a diversionary technique. Rather than think about how much you're charged every time you use the Interact machine, rather than think about how much money you're paying for your cell phone bill, they put up all these posters about they're supporting DEI. It's a diversion. Now finally, I think there are those in the DEI industry who are promoting this, and they might even know that it doesn't do any good. And I suggest this because one of the studies I cite in my report did a survey of DEI professionals. They are the HR departments. And in that survey, they found that 2/3 of them admitted that they felt that DEI did not do anything positive. So they've got that in their gut. But my point would be this, that people know it, but those who are the true believers, they see it as a useful tool. And it's a tool that they can use to recreate society in an image closer to what they would like. And I can confidently say that there's a direct line between the rise in anti-Semitism and the embrace of DEI instruction in our schools, universities, and businesses. DEI itself, what it does is it bifurcates society, it divides society into the oppressor and the oppressed. And if you fall on the side of the oppressor, and that's not based on evidence, by the way, what they will consider an oppressor is if someone is performing above the mean, if they're performing above the average, then they look at you with suspicion and they say that there's discrimination involved, that somehow you've gotten to your place of excellence through nefarious means. Well, when you look at the world through that kind of lens, anybody who's a high-performing group beyond the mean, they will become a target. Since the George Floyd riots of the 2020s, we've seen more civil unrest. We've got almost 100 churches burned in Canada, right? This is unheard of. This kind of activity just wasn't seen before. And I think that the more you say that discrimination is okay, and that's what DEI does, by the way. DEI says there are noble ways that you can use discrimination, which is absolute madness. Discrimination is always terrible. But they've justified it now. And when you give license for discrimination and hostility, it will eventually, that lesson will be learned, and you'll begin to see an unraveling of your society.
We see also like the DEI is being pushed in the school system. And we saw also, you're probably aware of the SOGI 123. What would be the impact on children if we just continue and push more and divide the children at one point?
The thing that strikes me about that question is there's a certain irony there. So you're right to say that they're pushing in our education system ideas that aren't founded. Now, do you see the irony there? The irony is that we have charged our public schools with the transference of knowledge. So knowledge is supposed to be factual. Knowledge is supposed to be rooted in evidence. And in our public schools all across Canada, they are promoting ideas that have no empirical basis. It almost begs the question, what are the public schools good for then? Every year, we see a decline in mathematics ability, scientific ability, abilities in writing, because there's more and more focus on these ideas related to DEI, whether it's on the gender front or on the racial front. And none of these ideas are rooted in the best science. You look from the 1960s up until the mid-2000s, even into about 2018, 2019, every measure was showing that people were becoming less racist. They were becoming more accepting of gender parity. So in all these measures, we saw improvement. And how was that done? It was done simply by our school systems, our universities saying, treat everybody equally. Treat people according to their merit and competency. It was a really simple method. It was just saying, don't be a jerk, but look at people's content of their character. And that worked. We saw it. We saw it in the sociological evidence. And then on the scene came DEI, which said the only cure for past discrimination is present discrimination. And now I'm not making that up. That is a quote from one of the DEI gurus, Ibram X. Kendi. He wrote a book. It's called How to Be Anti-Racist. And that book specifically says that in order to cure past discrimination, you need current discrimination. Well, that's madness. That is simply not the way that a society flourishes.
But who benefits from it?
Again, the people who are the DEI gurus, like Ibram X. Kendi, he's writing a book. It's now a bestseller. He's made millions. The people who are employed in this field. Give an example from the Toronto Public School Board. The Toronto Public School Board, it was last year, they paid an independent DEI consultant close to, well, it was around $60,000 for 4 days of workshops. And these workshops were conducted on Zoom. It was a single source contract. I mean, what other job can you get $60,000 for 4 days of work where you don't even have to go to the actual physical building? So there's a lot of money to be made there. But again, I would go back to this notion that the people who are promoting this, they really do want to see society change into their image. And that image is not very pretty. It's an image that holds up discrimination as a way to be, and it's not. And in the United States, we have politicians who are actually willing to address this head on. They call it out for what it is. They write bills that say this will not be taught in our school system. They say our government will not use DEI measures in order to do hiring. So we've got some really good examples in the US. In Canada, not so much. We're beginning to see premiers like the Premier of Alberta actually implementing some good fact-based policy. But elsewhere, I think many of our politicians federally and provincially, they're not very brave.
DEI is being pushed not only in the whole society, but especially in the school system. So please, if you think that we need to stop that, go over stopclassroomgrooming.com, sign the petition, make your voice heard, make it that we stop putting this kind of propaganda on our children. So go over stopclassroomgrooming.com and sign the petition right now.